How for all you've done to your bodies. It's still real to me, damn it. I mean,
back on the canvas, and this young man from West Texas State, unable to move effectively now, but Briscoe, this match is really taking its toll. Briscoe now moves up, and now Jack Briscoe sets his man and is going for that figure four. One mistake, it opened for just 1 second, and Terry Funk moves in. A count of three, and there's a new world heavyweight wrestling champion. Terry, wrestling history. The only time in wrestling history that two brothers have ever held the World Heavyweight Championship. Dory Funk held it for 4.5 years, and now Terry Funk has just achieved a lifetime dream. We're going to see this again in slow motion, and watch carefully now as Jack Briscoe, the champion. Notice he's open for just a split second. Terry Funk obviously has studied films on the champion. He watched him very carefully. He found this one flaw in the application of the figure four. Inside cradle. And in 28 minutes and 20 seconds of this one fall, 1 hour time limit match, Terry Funk has defeated the World Heavyweight Champion, Jack Briscoe. And Terry Funk, now you hear the ring announcer. There you see it. And Terry Funk, I think now, just now, becoming aware of what has happened to him. Terry Funk, dazed but jubilant. Obviously ecstatic now with joy as he has achieved a lifetime ambition. He has achieved the NWA World Heavyweight.
Guys, how else do you bring it on? Gordon Soley,
yeah,
calling Terry Funk over Jack Briscoe in Florida to win the NWA. And I love the way Gordon Soley says it, to win the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. I'm Randall Cunningham. This is Howie Chaney. This is Chainsaw Charlie. And we are here to pay tribute to Chainsaw Charlie, a.k.a. from the Double Cross Ranch in Amarillo, Texas, weighing 260 pounds, Terry Funk. Howie, you'll be hosting this tonight, and if folks can't tell, Randall is a big Terry Funk.
Well, yeah, it's kind of hard to tell, but we'll try to figure out which way you stand. It's great to be here tonight, guys. I'm glad that we were able to be here. Kind of a last-minute thing, but it's great being here on a Friday night talking about wrestling, but not only wrestling, but kind of a trailblazer as far as certain things goes in professional wrestling with Mr. Terry Funk.
Absolutely. I got notes somewhere. I did a little research, and I started researching it, and I'm sure Jeremy will say the same thing. But how do you sum up a 52-year career? And when I say this, and I'm sure we'll talk about it, a territory owner in Amarillo, a WCW wrestler, great feuds with Flair, an ECW heavyweight champion of the world, a traveling NWA heavyweight champion, a original opponent for the new world heavyweight champion in the WWF, terrible Terry Funk with Jimmy Hart versus Hulk Hogan, the biggest star in Japan at one point in his career, and most of all, holding the most prestigious title in the world in 1974-5 when he won it, the NWA Heavyweight Championship. I think Terry Funk gets overlooked horribly when we talk about the Mount Rushmore of the four greatest wrestlers. Turn it over to you, Howie and Jeremy.
No, I agree completely. I kind of sum up his career, break his career down in about 3 parts. As you look at it, and folks like me, They didn't realize, I didn't realize until later on when I was young. You didn't realize that Terry Funk had already had a fantastic career by the time you hit the 80s. He'd already won that NWA
Yes.
World Heavyweight Championship from Jack Briscoe. Had already won multiple titles with his brother Dory tag team. So he unbelievable. And then you get a little WWF run, but then you get into the Japan run, you get into like all you mentioned. And then at the time when you don't want to take chances, you're getting older. He gets more extreme, and he's taking these crazy bumps in his late 40s and 50s. Uh, Unbelievable.
To me, you said it perfectly. There's NWA Terry Funk. There's
Hmm.
WCW Terry Funk. There's WWF Terry Funk. Then there's Independent in Japan Terry Funk. Each one of those segments would have been a great career in itself. But then you put them all together and you get the only person I know that wrestled longer than Terry Funk was Dory Funk Jr. So the brothers went a while. 7, Howie. 7 retirement matches for Terry Funk. He said he had to go for 7 of them. So
Yeah.
Yeah, it's kind of like there in the opening when I said he is a trailblazer, because you never knew what Terry Funk you was going to get when he joined a alliance, association, a federation, whichever one it was. Um, this has been, I've told this several times on here, and Jeremy's in the same boat that I am as far as growing up, didn't have cable, didn't really know who Terry Funk was.
Hmm.
My first experience with Terry Funk was in Chattanooga. Him and some fella named Ric Flair. I'm not sure if he had a real good career or not, but anyway, back in the '80s, him and Ric Flair had a cage match up in Chattanooga, and that was my very first experience of seeing Terry Funk and realizing he's doing stuff that I'm not used to seeing, as far as some of the extreme moves that he was doing. And that's why I said he was kind of a trailblazer as well. So let's get started as far as the early career. And Randy, go ahead and kick us off with the your early thoughts of Terry Funk.
well, I am a little bit older, a lot older some ways.
That's why I went with you first.
Yeah, a little older. Just a little.
The first heavyweight champion I remember, the first traveling champion I remember is Jack Briscoe. And then I can remember to this day watching Harry Thornton, Channel 12, WDBF TV, wrestling. And Harry comes out with a telegram, and it's all official. And he goes, "Ladies and gentlemen, the NWA has announced in 28 minutes and 47 seconds, Terry Funk has defeated Jack Briscoe to become the new World Heavyweight Champion." So the first World Championship change in my life was Terry Funk over Jack Briscoe, and that stuck with me. And I just instantly loved Terry Funk. But I think it goes back just a little bit farther that his dad, Dory Funk Sr.,
Mm-hmm.
moved from Ohio, where he was up there wrestling, to West Texas and kind of made a territory where there was no territory, which is that West Texas, Amarillo, Arizona. And Jeremy, I'll send it over to you, but his son, Terry Funk, was a very good football player at West Texas in the time that we talk about. Ted DiBiase was there. Dusty Rhodes was there. Manny Fernandez was there.
Yes.
Tito Santana was there. Hanson was there. Brody was there. And a lot of that is credited to Dory Funk Sr. taking all these football players out of West Texas State and turning them into wrestlers, including his own son.
Yeah. I talk about a football. I mean, think about that. I mean, that's comparable when we think about, we talked about Vern in the AWA last week, but that's, a lot of wrestlers came out of Minnesota, came out of that Minneapolis and that area. Uh, the guys that came out of West Texas right there is pretty comparable with the number of guys that played football. And if I'm not mistaken, didn't Steve Williams play football there also, which that's later on, but
He was a little later. He
yeah,
was at North Texas State.
but he was out.
Yes, and he went through Chris Adams Wrestling School at WCCW.
Yeah.
Oh, but
Yeah. So Dory Senior, uh, that's where Terry got started, obviously, with his dad. And my first remembrance, you said you were talking about him beating Jack Briscoe for the 10 pounds of gold. My first remembrance of Terry Funk was in about 1985, and I don't know if y'all remember the TV show Wild Side.
yeah,
As Prometheus Jones. That's my first remembrance of Terry Funk was from a TV show. I never imagined at that point that he was a wrestler. Now that's right in the time I got into wrestling, started keeping up with it, and I'm like, oh, he's a wrestler too. Wow, So gosh, that's a long time ago.
yeah. I didn't even Howie. I didn't even buzz up on his acting career. He was in Roadhouse. He was in Paradise Isle. He was Style Salon. He was kind of a successful actor. I'm glad you brought that up because it's strange, but there was like a period after he loses the World Heavyweight Championship, he just kind of falls off the national scene, but he shows up in the movies. Then the next time you really hear from him is 1981, and that's in Memphis with Jerry Lawler, which
Yeah.
is the famous empty arena match. So there was kind of a period in the late 70s where I think he did a lot of acting.
Yeah, so 78 is the earliest that I've read that he was an acting, and he played in a film called Paradise Alley. I'm not familiar with the film.
It is Sly Stallone. Terry Funk is the shooter, circus traveling carnival world champion back in the 30s. And it is, as Jim Cornette would say, I'm sure it's one of the movies he made his students watch at OVW.
Yeah.
There's a
Now the
lot.
cool. I'm
Uh,
sorry, Randall.
there was a scene where it's raining and Terry Funk wrestles in the rain and he's doing all these moves and these suplexes and stuff, and he's hitting the canvas and water is splashing up. It's just absolutely great.
So, side note on that particular movie is he also served as the stunt coordinator
Yes.
in that movie. Uh, so, Terry Funk, late people younger than us remember him with barbed wire and all this stuff. Terry Funk was a very diverse person as far as actor, musician, I do believe.
Yeah.
Served as stunt coordinator. Changed his style, and different incarnations of Terry Funk. Unbelievable.
Absolutely.
Terry is one of the ones. He could be the only one, and y'all can correct me on this. He may be the only one that has held a belt in every federation or wrestling alliance, major ones, except for AEW, and that's just because it started 4 years ago. But as far as all the major ones, he has held some type of belt in that. And if you can do that, you're one heck of a wrestler.
Yeah.
It's a shame that Terry Funk never was a WWF World Heavyweight Champion, because you think about it, NWA, he was an NWA champion, an ECW champion, competed many times for the AEWA championship, competed many times for the WWF championship. If you throw either the AWA or the WWF title into this mix, then I think he is talked about being the greatest of all time.
But he
Yeah.
did hold a tag team title in the WWF, so he
Yeah.
did have. He had some
Yeah.
type of title in everywhere he went.
Yeah,
And,
yeah. He held with Cactus Jack.
Absolutely.
Uh, and it was, I remember they were the tag, it was Chainsaw, and that was great too, by the way. I have to admit, I liked Chainsaw Charlie.
And you know what's cool about it is that was his idea.
Yeah,
That was completely his idea, his gimmick, and and it worked. It worked, although for a short time, but it was his gimmick.
if I'm not mistaken, y'all can probably correct me on this, but when he was introduced by Mick Foley, Mankind, well, whatever he was at that time, Mick said, "I've got a tag team partner," and they just rolled a box out there, and everybody's like, "What is that box?" And all of a sudden, the chainsaw starts up, and Chainsaw Charlie cuts his way out of that box, and you got the new WWF Tag Team Champions.
yeah, that's it. And,
Yeah.
and hey, if you're trying to not to let you know it's Terry Funk, next time buy a little better mask and a pair of pantyhose.
Yeah, I know. Maybe that was part of the charm of it. It's
It
just,
was.
hey, I'm in disguise, but I'm not.
But he had been in the WWF for a long time prior to that. After they sold Amarillo, and I'm getting a little ahead of myself, there was about a 2-year run where him and Dory went up, and then Dory left, and he stayed, managed by Jimmy Hart, and went around the circuit as one of Hulk Hogan's main opponents early in his WWF run.
Yep.
And terrible Terry Funk, but that's
Yeah.
also I think his how he I think going back to these early days, his little gimmick with the branding iron
Yes.
and the shawl and the leathers that he wore and the cowboy hat and the fact I think he had the coolest ring announcement. And I did it earlier, and I'm gonna do it 1,000 times. It always from the Double Cross Ranch in Amarillo, Texas,
Yep.
and more than anybody in pro wrestling, I still remember from the Double Cross Ranch in Amarillo, Texas. I can't even tell you where Hulk Hogan was built from. I don't know. I know Hulk. I know it's Venice Beach, but
California. Yeah.
but
So I'm glad you mentioned that, Randall, because I told you guys first memory of Terry Funk was in on a TV show. That was my first memory of Terry Funk in a wrestling ring, and I love that Brandon Iron, the whole deal. It's probably my favorite of all.
Terry Funk was one of these, in my opinion, was good guy, bad guy, whatever. Everybody loved him, regardless, because of some of the stuff that he would do in the ring.
yeah, absolutely. Um, and he could be the good guy, but that feud you were talking about earlier, Howie in the WCW. Does anybody remember how that started? Because that's a great story.
I don't remember how
I,
it started.
I
I just know
do.
the match ended up. I think it was a cage match that night, and there's a lot of blood.
Yeah,
Imagine that with the Ric
But
Flair, Terry Funk, a lot of blood.
well, Funk was he was a special guest, Flair Steamboat,
yes,
and he attacks Flair after the match. Pile drives him, I do believe. Oh no, was it on the announce table?
it was, and it wasn't a
I,
gimmick table. And that thing I sent y'all the other night from Ric Flair was Funk power driving me up. Hey, come over here. Let me drive you on this table. Oh, we haven't done for it there, Terry Funk. But come on, Rick, let me put your head through this table. Evidently,
oh my god.
Funk was just a little bit crazy.
Yeah, that's why I said he is a trailblazer, because you would see, in my opinion, when I watched it, I saw a lot of stuff that I never saw before, because the only wrestling I really got to see for several years was WWE when they were on Saturday mornings on the local channels, and there's usually main event, a Saturday night's main event, and then sometimes a Saturday morning show. And you didn't see people like Terry Funk on those shows with the WWF at that time.
No.
And he came out, and when I saw him, I'm like, who is this fella? He's different. And
Go ahead, Howie. I'm sorry.
no,
I'm
done. He just proved to himself that to everybody he was just totally different.
Yeah. So let me ask you a question, Howie, on that. To me, Terry Funk always looked, to me, I always thought he was a larger man than what he actually was. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Like when he came to the ring, you thought he was this one of those monsters. In reality, he is a big guy, but in comparison to Hulk Hogan, in comparison to some of the other guys, but he always just, I think part of it was his persona and how you thought of him as one of those big, imposing wrestlers.
He remade his body a little bit, Jeremy. As NWA World, I love saying that like Gordon Soley. As NWA World Heavyweight Champion, he was about 260. As the wrestler that competed in WCW and ECW, he was about 230. So he from that bulldozer style to doing the back salt. Worst back salt ever, maybe except Brock Lesnar, Shooting Star Press, where he came off the ladder and tried to land it and just basically smushed his face. But can I play something fast? Talked about it real. I want to get this in. I'm sorry. Oh, it would go to commercial.
There it was.
But yeah, back to what you're saying, Randy. They list them here on Wikipedia as being billed at 6'1", 247.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, as the NWA champion, he was a solid 260, and just built different. If you saw what I had up earlier, that was, here you go. I got it. I'm going to play this real fast. I just want to play this, get it out of the way, because we got to play it at some point. Got to go back a little bit, boys. There you go.
Let me first introduce the manager, the Mouth of the South, Jimmy Hart. He represents the challenger from the Double Cross Ranch in Amarillo, Texas, weighing 260 pounds, Terrible Terry Funk.
That's so good. And what about that music too? Perfect.
Yeah.
The intro, that's awesome.
But yeah, right. He did. He wasn't huge, but he kind of remade himself. Go ahead, Alec.
I know that he wasn't the first one to ever do that, but to me, my memory, he was the first one that wasn't just from a Chattanooga, Tennessee. He was from Double Cross Ranch.
Yeah. You were wondering where it was.
Yeah, it's kind of like the whole address, not just Amarillo, Texas.
I love it.
It was almost one of those things that I thought you could drop. I remember thinking, wonder if I mail something to Terry Funk at the Double Cross Ranch, Amarillo, Texas. Maybe to get there,
But my goodness.
We would read off all of his championship accomplishments, but we would be here all night long. I mean, it was, like I said earlier, he held a belt in not only just a championship, heavyweight championship, or tag team titles, or TV titles, or intercontinental titles. He held a belt everywhere he was at, and even to this point where he was an ECW World Heavyweight Champion back in the 90s.
Twice.
And officially crowned the lifetime ECW champion by Paul Heyman, and given a belt where forever in posterity, when he was doing one of his 27 retirements, he was remembered as the ECW heavyweight champion.
Now, did he not play a huge role in kind of bringing ECW forward.
Yeah.
Uh,
I actually got this queued up, and it'll take me a minute to find it. But that's a great point. Have any of y'all seen the movie Beyond the Mat?
mhm. It's been a while, but I have.
There's a speech that Paul Heyman gives about Terry Funk in that movie that is maybe, you know, it's maybe one of the best things I've ever heard in wrestling. But it was, um, you know, thank Terry Funk for being unselfish in selfish times, for showing the younger kids a better way, you know. And Terry Funk was 50 something years old at that point working at ECW. And Paul Heyman basically was telling him that, telling everybody that, Terry Funk had sacrificed for this company. And, you know, his career without ECW might have died right there, too. He always seemed to find the one place to hold on. But yeah, that was great. And you know what we haven't even mentioned? I thought Jeremy was locked up, Howie. Uh, he was the biggest star in Japan in All Japan Wrestling for years. You talk about those championships. How many did he hold in All Japan?
Oh man, let's see, All Japan. All Japan Wrestling. It started back in 1977 when he
Yeah,
had the strongest tag league with Dory Jr. So from 77, and then the last one he held was in 1990 is what it says. So what is that? 23 years.
yeah, and booked territory for a large part of that. He would be responsible for bringing the Americans over.
Yeah.
So it was
Yeah.
kind of,
I kind of wish that I had went through and added all this stuff up just to see how many belts that he actually held. But I mean, it's just a list of different belts and titles and championships and Hall of Fames and uh, championship wrestling from Florida. He held titles there, and he just traveled the world, and everywhere he went, he is a big success because everybody, like we said earlier, he was one of these that hey, welcome back, Jeremy.
I don't know what happened. I just internet went out or something.
But
boys, yeah.
he's one of these that just went all around the world and was successful as well. Talking about him in Japan now, Jeremy.
Yeah. So, well, IWA or FMW?
All
Just
Japan is where we
I
Japan.
started.
love it. Yeah. Yeah. What a career. I can remember watching some of the All Japan matches with him and Dory Funk, and I thought it was the coolest thing ever when they would announce them and they came into the ring. There was streamers and stuff going everywhere. It was a big deal to the Japanese wrestling fans to have them there.
It was a big deal, but it's hard to believe that Terry Funk would want something like that.
Yeah,
You would think that the Japan people would have to talk to him and say, "We want to do this for you. Please let us do it," and him tell them no. But because he wasn't one that, to me, it don't seem like he was one of these that wanted the flash and the streamers and the confetti and all that stuff. But he got it when he was over there.
yeah, definitely.
And y'all make a good point. And we were talking about Howie that you know, and Jeremy, about how when he was over there, he was as big as Brody and Hanson, and he brought a lot of those guys over there.
Hmm.
I do want to play a little of this speech. This is from the movie Beyond the Mat. Paul Heyman talking about Terry Funk, the person. I overran it just a little bit. Give me a second. Give it back.
It's better than anything in the world that you can have. And tell them that I said
Here we go. Let's go back just a second. Let it play out here.
17 million homes that have availability for this show tonight will pay $20, hopefully, for the privilege to see you guys do what you have done for 3.5 years. Thank Terry Funk for all he's done for this company, for help putting us on the map, for being unselfish in selfish times, for taking the young guys and showing them a better way. Tonight we have a chance to say, yeah, you're right. We're too extreme.
That, to me, that's the ultimate compliment. Anybody that
Mhm.
invests in the future generation, you know, wrestling is a cutthroat sport.
Mhm.
And somebody like Terry Funk willing to work with younger people, that means a lot. Had legendary feuds with Mick Foley there, Raven, and Shane Douglas. So that's Howie. That's a heck of a compliment for being a selfish man at selfish times.
You can't say extreme wrestling without saying Terry Funk. Period.
No,
So, you know,
no.
he had to be there at some point, whether some type of, even if it's just one match, he had to show up at ECW at least one time, just because he was, to me, he was the innovator of the extreme wrestling matches.
But and isn't it true that at that point he had already been in IWA
Yes.
and participated in the death matches with Cactus Jack? Um, I think at that point he'd already been in IWA, and that was kind of where that's where he morphed into that extreme type wrestling. I think what they had exploding death barbed wire matches and uh yeah, exploding ring match. Uh, so he'd already started that transition and come over when he came over to ECW.
And you know, there's one question I'd like to ask both of you, and I'd just love to hear the answer. Uh, and, you know how you're hosting it. I don't want to jump in, but what's your favorite Terry Funk memory? What's the one thing you go to?
It'd probably be when I first time I ever saw him, which was in person. It wasn't on TV or nothing. First time I remember seeing him was in person there at Chattanooga against Ric Flair. And it was a cage match that ended up out on the floor and back in the cage and back out on the floor and back in the cage with a couple of drops of blood, but not much.
How about you, Jeremy?
Yeah, for me, I mean, I two things, but I go back to the first time I saw him come out in WWF as terrible Terry Funk, and like you mentioned, you loved it, and I did too. That guard, that whole get up with the branding iron, and feuding with Hulk Hogan, because I thought, man, Hulk Hogan's gonna, he may get beat by this guy. Really felt it. And then secondly, it would be just the angle with Flair, attacking Flair after the Steamboat match, pile driving him, and then leading up to the I Quit match. So those are my favorites from what I have seen and remember.
It's funny. Two of my favorites are matches he lost. Jerry Lawler, empty arena, he quit.
I'd forgot.
And Flair, I quit to end that feud. But that shows me he's a real man if he's willing to lose a little bit too. And Terry Funk could lose and not kill his. But I
Right.
think one of my favorite things was him, Gary Hart, the Great Buddha, the Magic Dragon, as the J-Tex Corporation in WC.
J-Tex.
I love that. It just owned me every time. But Howie, I'll turn it to you. But that's good to hear. I didn't realize you saw Funk. I'm kind of a little jealous you saw that match.
Yeah, I have too.
It was back in the 80s. They came up to UTC Arena. It was a house show. There's no cameras there or nothing. But the main event that night was Terry Funk against Ric Flair in a cage match. Elegante was there that night. One of the biggest human beings I think I've ever saw in person. He couldn't do much in the ring, but it was just seeing him out there. I mean, where I was sitting at, when Elegante walked to the ring there, you could see him from a mile away because he stood head and shoulders above everybody. But anyway, yeah, seeing Terry Funk in person was great. And so let's get back to we've talked about the early years. Let's talk about some of the later time, because it says he didn't retire till 2017, which is only 7 years ago. So 71 was when he retired. So let's talk a little bit about that, Randy, as far as his longevity in the wrestling business.
And I don't want to make this about Beyond the Mat, but there's a scene in Beyond the Mat where they tell him that basically he's a cripple. He wrestled 20 years past that. And Beyond the Mat was shot at the time he was in ECW. And he danced around a lot of things. And if you remember in that later part of his career, when he went to the WWF with Mick Foley, he was real restricted in what he could do, but he wasn't afraid to do anything. If you remember the scene, the New Age Outlaws put Foley and Terry Funk into a dumpster and rolled that dumpster off the stage. And, that man was fearless to me. About that moonsault in ECW, and we haven't even talked about the how much he's influenced wrestling. That failed ECW, that failed AEW, Kenny Omega, John Moxley exploding barbed wire match. If you want to see how that's supposed to be, go Google Terry Funk and Onita, and they really do blow up the ring in that match. But
that was FMW, wasn't it?
It was. And I think Terry Funk continued to stay active. And I remember in WCW, and it really was one of his last runs, after the Flair feud, he came back again. And that's when he came back. And he was kind of good guy, and he feuded with Norman Smiley, and he kind of hardcore champion. And he was, I want to say, 52 years old, Howie. And one night on WCW, he came out, and everybody was expecting him to announce his 37th retirement. And he had just become a granddad, and he's 52, and he makes this whole 20-minute shoot at WCW, and everybody in that building believe he's retiring. And finally, at the end, he goes, "I just signed a 1-year extension to my contract." So walking away, and at the end of it was he'd signed up for another year in WCW. Him and Jerry Lawler were still wrestling matches in the late teens, and Terry Funk had become a lot of what he wasn't, but I think he stopped at 17.
Yes.
His wife died in 19.
Yeah.
And then he's been, this is Terry Funk. This is what the last thing, if I tell anything that anybody leaves here, Terry Funk was in the nursing home, basically gave over to hospice a couple years ago, is now living on his own in the Double Cross Ranch, walking, being kicked out of it. How many people do you know has been kicked out of being in the nursing home under full-time care to then live on their own again? To me, that's a tough man. But at the end of it, Howie, nobody beats Father Time. And some of those matches with Jerry Lawler in the 10s, it's hard to watch. To me, his last really good work was that after he left ECW, after he left WCW, after he left WWE, there was a couple of years he could still work, but it got. I was glad when he walked away. I'll put it that way, but he influenced a whole generation.
Yeah, and the longer he went, the knees started.
The knees were terrible.
Buckling, I guess you could say. He couldn't stand straight up because his knees was shot, basically. Kind of like Hogan is as well. The knees were shot. When he went to the ring, he might have been billed at 6'1", but later on it was probably around 5'10", 5'9", something like that, because of his knees not being able to stand straight up. So, Jeremy, what's your thoughts on some of this stuff? Oh, Jeremy disappeared again. So, Randy, we'll go back with you. What's some of your thoughts on that?
I don't want to make that sad, the last thing I said. One of the greatest things, there's a promo that the Briscoes done in Ring of Honor, and they did it a couple of times when they would face somebody, and they'd be in like once was against Team Jiu-Jitsu, and they were doing this whole promo on the chicken farm, and it was, of course, Jay and Mark, and Jay was doing most of it. At the end of it, his line, very famous to this day, I was trying to look it up, was Terry Funk didn't wear no mouthpiece. And you think about that. That's just who Terry Funk was. He didn't wear, ain't no mouthpiece, ain't no knee pads. I mean, go look at his early. He wore those like 99-cent Kmart knee pads and a trunk.
Right.
No elbow protection. While we're waiting on Jeremy, though, have you ever heard the Flaming getting sued, ECW getting sued over the Brandon Arn story?
I hadn't heard about that.
Well, I just got Jeremy back. I want to tell this story where Jeremy, evidently.
Notice I changed my name, guys.
Bad Internet Jones. That's funny. Evidently, Cactus Jack back then was going to have a Flaming Brandon Arn match. And Terry, being Terry, wrapped a towel around the branding yarn and set the son of a bitch on fire and headed to the ring. And he said, Mick Foley tells the story. He said, Terry got in the ring, started whirling that thing around, and it flew up and set some woman in the first row on fire. And Paul Heyman ended up sued over Terry Funk's Flaming Brandon Arn trick. And they was like trying to put it out, and said that Terry said he whirled it around there, and about the second time, boom, in the front row, and he had set half the front row on fire.
Oh my gosh. Oh my gosh.
Jerry, I was talking about Briscoe's promo where they if you ain't heard it, you ought to go look it up. Jay Briscoe kept saying, Terry Funk didn't wear no mouthpiece. Terry Funk didn't have no mouthpiece.
Oh, hey, quite a comedian too. I mean, if you think about his humor, I mean, I know we've talked about the Extreme and classic wrestling, and he was really funny, and could bring that to the ring.
Yeah, you basically took the next thing I was going to bring up right out of my mouth, was the fact of, to me, how good of a talker he was. Not just a wrestler, hardcore. He was a good person on the microphone.
Yeah.
It's just that to me is that raspy voice, and that slow talking. It just got me every time.
Yeah.
Dusty Rhodes, egg sucking dog.
Oh, when he starts to talk about his brother Dory.
My favorite promos held here. Let me give you a little Terry Funk promo here for you. This is from against Dusty Rhodes in 1982. Well, I don't know if I can get it loud enough. It's really low, really, really low. May work on the sound just.
So while you're working on that,
I think I got it here.
okay.
Go ahead. Let me.
His comments.
Dusty Rhodes, you no good for nothing, egg-sucking dog. I'm sick and tired of having you claim to be a cowboy. You with your putrid body, your veins, trying to claim that you are the greatest at a bull rope match. You don't even know what a bull rope match is. You don't even know what a rodeo is. You're a drug store cowboy. That's exactly what you are. And I've rode in rodeo after rodeo after rodeo. And I intend on doing the same if I ever get you in the ring in a bull rope match. I know what I'm doing, and I'm going to ride you around that ring, and I'm going to whip on you, and I'm going to spur on you, and I'm going to whip, and I'm going to spur, and I'm going to ride, and I'm going to put you up wet, boy. I'm going to put you up wet. That's what do, because rodeoing was when you put a man against an animal, and I know you're a pig. Just like your mama was a pig.
Woo.
There's a pig, and you should stay nestled in that sow's belly instead of ever coming into a ring and trying to compete with me. Now, a bull match goes until there's a submission. Well, in a rodeo, you don't even realize that you just got to ride that bull 8 seconds. Well, I'm going to ride you until you run out of gas, and you're going to be snorting, and you're going to be sweating, and you're going to be breathing oh so heavy, because there must be a winner, and you are going to admit you're going to admit that I'm the best.
That's a Terry Funk promo.
That's a dang good promo.
Dusty Rhodes, your mama's a pig.
It was believable though.
Yeah.
It was very believable.
We're getting here close to the end of the show, and I want to talk about something real quick that a lot of people don't really talk about with Terry Funk, but it's the fact of you don't hear nobody say anything bad about him.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of odd as far as in the wrestling business. Usually somebody throws that little jab in there about someone, regardless of who it is. I've never heard anybody say a bad word about Terry Funk.
Well, if you haven't watched, and this is my third time I'm referencing it, and I guess this is the point I really fell in love with Terry Funk. If you go back and watch Beyond the Mat, there's a scene where there's a failed wrestler that's been out of the business for years, and he's having one of his retirement shows, and it's a big one. It's in Amarillo, and in the main event, it's the WWF champion at the time, Bret Hart, against Terry Funk. And he shows a real human side to another human and goes and gets this guy to referee the match and treats a guy that's obviously not at Terry Funk's level like he's an equal. And he brings him in and you hear him and it almost touches your heart. And there's also a scene in that movie where him and Mick Foley are in the corner of the WWF ring or ECW ring, and they're talking about how they love to make each other hurt because they make each other hurt more the more money they make. And that's their philosophy. The more I do to you, Nick, the more money we make. And that's to me, that's a guy who knew professional wrestling it was a work. And when he went to Memphis, he lost to Jerry Lawler. When he went to Florida, he lost to Dusty Rhodes. But it was Terry Funk, and he was going to go to the next place, and he was going to be the next. He was Terry Funk, and people ask me where I rank Terry Funk as an NWA World Heavyweight Champion. I have Ric Flair, Harley Race, and Terry Funk. That's how much I think of Terry Funk.
Mm.
Go ahead, Jeremy.
No, that's good company. So, if I'm remembering correctly, his when he lost that NWA title after his first kind of, I think, what was it, about a year long after he beat Jack Briscoe?
Yeah.
Yeah, he actually lost to Harley Race at that point. And if I had this came to my mind earlier. So did he get that match with Jack Briscoe because Dory was not going to be able to make it or
So
was unavailable?
here's the whole story, and I think this would make a great movie. This is the original Montreal Screwjob. Dory Funk had been champion for 4.5 years, was scheduled to drop the title in Houston to Jack Briscoe. Evidently, Dory, rumored, didn't want to drop the title to Jack Briscoe in Texas. Jack Briscoe's very famously an Oklahoman and a Native American. So what they did was they took and had Dory lose to Harley in Toronto, and then he brought it back to the U.S. and lost to Jack Briscoe. Dory was supposedly going to wrestle Jack in Florida, and storyline, Dory couldn't make it, so Terry replaced him and won the NWA title, and they did all that. So for the next 2 weeks, they had all these Jack gets his rematch matches back in Florida and sold Florida out for a week straight.
Nice.
So, but they were legit respectful tension between the Briscoes and the Funks. Jack and Jerry Briscoe from Oklahoma, both stars at the University of Oklahoma. Dory and Terry, both from Texas, both dominated the NWA scene. I think if that plays out a little better, Jeremy, we see that title end up on David Von Erich from that lineage and all the Flair runs. So I think when Terry was done, Terry was making so much money in Japan that he made more money as a American working in Japan than he did as NWA champion at some point. So he went to Japan and stayed many, many years. So it's strange, but you're 100% right. They had to get Harley in the loop to get the title off of Dory to give it to Jack, and then Dory was supposed to take it back from Jack, but it ended up being Terry going to Florida and winning it. So, guys, I'm sorry I've dominated this show, but y'all,
no,
I know when y'all said Terry Funk last week, my favorite wrestlers of all time are Dusty Rhodes, Ric Flair, and Terry Funk. To this day, that's my three guys. If I could have a dinner party set down with three wrestlers, it would be Funk, Flair, and Dusty, because I love those three, man. I grew up with those three.
Yeah, that's good company to keep.
Yeah, you kind of took my next question away. I was going to kind of see if you could figure out some way of answering this without giving the actual answer away, because eventually we're going to have a hopefully a top 10 of all time. Yeah, we know where the top 10 goes It'll probably be top 20. But anyway, a top 10 of all-time wrestlers, individual wrestlers, singles wrestlers. And without saying what number or wherever, would Terry Funk be in that top 10?
I'll let Jeremy go first.
Ah,
Now,
again,
let me clarify that. This is all-time, every single wrestler you've ever saw. Would he be in
oh
the
God, I don't know, man. I'd have to have an A and a B for each one, and I don't. He'd be right there. I'll say that. Um, if you look at the longevity, it depends on your criteria too. But if you gauge it on championships, longevity, what he was able to do, and all these different, yes, absolutely, I would say.
You, you,
Uh,
you that's you're stealing my thunder. As much as I love him, it's hard to put him in front of somebody like Hulk Hogan
yeah,
that millions and millions of dollars, or Stone Cold Steve Austin, or The Rock, and it
right,
matters criteria. If it's Randy's fandom, it's Terry Funk. If
right,
it's you know, um, I love Ricky.
pure, 100% pure wrestler? It don't matter about the money. It don't matter about titles and all that. 100% pure, just wrestling.
I don't think he makes. I don't think he was. He had that period. He was kind of innovated in the '90s, but if you look at Terry Funk for a large part of it, he was like I'm not the biggest Ric Flair fan as far
right,
as wrestling goes. I think Ric Flair all looked the same. Nothing against Ric Flair, but
yeah,
every looked the same. Uh, I put Terry kind of in. Terry had Terry Funk spots. Terry
hmm,
Funk over the top rope. Terry Funk was going to have his knees wobble on him. Terry Funk was going to get up, and Terry Funk was great at what he did, but he had Terry Funk moves, and that I don't know that you can say Terry Funk is a ring technician like Bret Hart or even Stone Cold Steve Austin, but
yeah,
you have to be back then. You had to do the same thing in a different city every night.
yeah.
It didn't have to be original. You just um, how to answer your question though, if you put the top 10 promos of all time, Terry Funk's probably there.
Hmm.
Yeah, we can have top tens can be all different type of criteria like we've talked about, Jeremy's talked about, and for my question is just pure out 100%. I know as far as fan favorites, he's top 10 for everybody, probably.
Oh shit, I'm gonna get a Terry Funk tattoo after tonight. Oh, I'm just cutting.
You'll post it on this site when it's done.
Look, Jeremy's gonna be Terry. I'll just be Dory. I ain't got no hair. He does a better Terry.
So look, on a side note right here, we were talking about Vern Gagne and we talked about the fact that he didn't later on he didn't really look the part. He lost his hair early. He didn't really look like a wrestler. Dory Funk Jr. is one of those guys too. Uh, Terry always looked like a wrestler. Dory, especially later years, Dory never really looked like much of a wrestler to me.
Dory looked like the guy that sells candy out the back of the van.
Yeah, he did. I like it. Hey, I'll go with that. Oh man, that's funny. Well, my brother Dory.
Guys, we're getting
Yeah,
close to the end of the show. Let's give a shout out to our sponsor, Wilburn's Waxing Solutions. While Randy's pulling that up real quick, Wilburn's Waxing Solutions, licensed and insured. Give them a call for free estimates. I've known the gentleman my whole life, and he'll do you right, and he'll be straightforward and honest with you. That's something you don't get from a lot of business people no more.
whew. Ain't that the truth, brother?
but he will be. And so give him a call at Wilburn's Waxing Solution, 256-996-9731. So, gentlemen, to wrap it up real quick, one more quick question about Terry Funk, and then I'll tell you what we're going to be discussing next week. So, Terry Funk overall, is he overrated or underrated, Jeremy?
Underrated by far.
Randy?
Underappreciated, under misunderstood, and lost in history a little bit. And I said it earlier, the greatest movie that could be made about a pro wrestler might be Terry Funk's life, because it's not the normal, I went to the WWE and wrestled 20 years, or I went to WCW. That man was an independent, he was the truest form of an independent contractor his whole career.
So I know I said that was going to be the last one, but with you saying something, it brought up one more question. If Terry Funk was able to wrestle today in his prime, would he be on top of the world?
I got an answer, but you go ahead first, Jeremy.
Yes. He'd be in AEW, and he'd be bleeding every week. So
He would be the NWJP heavyweight champion, appearing in AEW.
mm-hmm.
We have kind of a Terry Funk in AEW. And when I throw this out here, when you just think about styles, who's most like Terry Funk that's in stylish? John Moxley. John Moxley has got to be the biggest Terry Funk fan that's ever, because he wrestles like him, he writes promos like him, and I know you thought I was going to say somebody else, but
No.
I really see a little Moxley in Terry Funk. I think that's the serious form of flattery that you get. I also think one Stone Cold Steve Austin can go back through and look through his history, and there was a Terry Funk tape somewhere in Stone Cold Steve Austin's library. So he's influenced some great wrestlers to me. Bruiser Brody, Stan Hansen. They're all straight out of the Terry Funk school of wrestling.
All right, guys. Next week, we're going to kind of step away from the wrestling for a minute, but we're going to stay in the wrestling as well. Your top 10 or top 10 A's and B's of all time, everywhere managers.
Oh.
Oh.
Nice.
That sounds harder than it really, that sounds like it'll be harder than you think it is.
I think we could do it. I have confidence we could do it. I'm thinking of about 5 or 6 right now.
I will go ahead and predict Jim Cornette will be on my list. Liberal and art.
Hey, if he's not on both of you's list, I'm going to kick both of you off the show because.
Well, we deserve it. So if that's the case, we deserve it.
Oh, yeah, I'm good, because you go back and think about that 60s, 70s, and 80s. Everybody had a manager.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot.
That's right.
No criteria, anything. No criteria, anything goes. Anybody that's you ever saw manage a wrestling match, even if it's just a celebrity appearance that maybe they did something. Top 10 managers of all time.
Oh, wow.
Wow. Hey, does that include valets?
Yes.
Oh, we're good now.
Now my list is, I've got A, B's, and C's.
This is gonna be tough.
I'm sure you're gonna have a lot of C's with the valets.
Yeah, yes. I'm gonna leave next week. Chicago's gonna be a lot higher than you think he is.
Who's that?
Whew.
The guy from Chicago, Hofstrata Street, going to be higher than you think he is.
Wow.
Oh man.
Guys, it's a great show. Enjoyed it.
Wasn't a
Terry,
great show. Talk too much.
no, it was great. Terry Funk, an innovator, motivator, and taught the could have caused a lot of this that we see now, but it made it a lot better, I think, by a
Mm-hmm.
lot of stuff that he done.
I went ahead and put on my name, QB1, Terry Funk Mark.
Yeah.
I'm a graduate of Funk U.
How much money would he make on that shirt today?
It's got to be out there right now.
I tried to get one here for this. It'll probably be here tomorrow, but I ordered one. Just when I saw I couldn't get it here in time, I was like, I'm still going to get it because I bought one and it said from the Double Cross Ranch on the back of it. So I just went ahead and let them ship it because it's something I've always wanted. You know what I found, and this will be my last words, and I don't have the money to buy it, but it was the greatest wrestling collectible I ever seen. A dual sign Terry Funk, Ric Flair, where Funk surrenders to him in the I Quit match. It's a picture of them in that position with Flair at the figure 4 on it.
Wow.
By Terry Funk and Ric Flair. I wanted it so bad, Anna Lee almost lost her college fund.
Oh my gosh. Whew, good choice.
Any last thoughts, guys?
Great job, Howie.
Yeah, great job, Howie. I'm sorry about my internet. I don't know what's up with that. So we'll see if we can fix that for next time.
Hey, folks, when we go off the air, hang on just a minute. So for Randall, for Jeremy, for Howie, for guys at Hendon Hooker, Wilbur, and thank you. We'll be back. And hey, you'll hear the word Terry. Terry Funk didn't wear no mouthpiece.